Beneath the citrus trees of La Favarella, Michele Greco, better known as the Pope, built a criminal empire that fooled even Sicily's highest religious figures and social elites. His estate became a silent witness to unspeakable horrors, brown production, executions, and the secret disposal of Mafia victims. Michele Greco, famously nicknamed the Pope within the circles of organized crime, carefully maintained the image of a peaceful and hard-working farmer, tending to mandarin orchards and vineyards. Outwardly, he presented himself as a humble landowner whose life revolved around agriculture and devout faith in God. Throughout the lengthy and highly publicized Maxi trial, where he stood among the main defendants, Greco consistently and stubbornly denied any ties to Cosa Nostra, insisting that his only affiliations were to hard work and divine faith. In a strange and unsettling way, he was not entirely lying. He was indeed a diligent cultivator and a deeply religious man. However, his faith coexisted with far darker activities. He manufactured heroin from the poppies he grew, trafficked narcotics, and even turned his sprawling estate, La Favarella, into a macabre crematorium where Mafia victims' bodies were disposed of in secret. Greco's connection to organized crime ran deep in his bloodline. He inherited leadership of the powerful Sicily clan from his father, Giuseppe Greco, following in his footsteps not only as the head of the family but also as a ruler of the criminal enterprise from their estate. His cousin, Salvatore Greco, served an equally critical role, acting as the secretary of the Sicilian Mafia's commission. The roots of the Greco family's criminal influence were humble yet significant. Michele's father had once worked as a gabellato, a rural land administrator, for Count Tagliavia, overseeing a 300-hectare estate filled with mandarin groves. Yet beyond his official role, Giuseppe Greco held authority as the clan leader and was responsible for igniting a bloody mafia war against the rival Bonaccorso family. The feud culminated violently on September 17, 1947, in a public square in Sicily, where machine guns, rifles, and pistols were fired in a brutal clash that left 5 dead. It was the young Michele who ultimately stepped in to broker peace, using diplomacy to end the conflict and solidify his status as the new boss of the Sicily clan. Born on May 12, 1924, in Sicily, a suburb of Palermo barely 8 kilometers from the city center, Michele Greco's life was shaped by privilege rather than poverty. Unlike many men of honor who rose to crime out of necessity, he came from a relatively prosperous background. But it was Michele himself who significantly expanded the family's wealth, methodically taking over the properties once owned by his father's former employer through a combination of legitimate deals and outright criminal activities. In addition to amassing land, Greco and several allied families secured dominance over the local water supply. As landowners, they were permitted to drill private wells, yet they were legally obliged to share excess water with the community. They did so, but at exorbitant prices, effectively exploiting a critical resource for financial gain. Another cornerstone of the Greco fortune was their extensive vineyard, covering 125 hectares, along with their growing entanglement in the drug trade. Michele added his own innovation to the family's illicit enterprises, a full-scale heroin refinery operating within La Favarella, feeding the global narcotics market. The nickname the Pope was not given to Michele Greco without reason. It reflected his exceptional ability to maintain harmonious relations with all the major mafia clans, a rare and valuable skill in a world built on violence and betrayal. Greco possessed an uncanny instinct for identifying rising power, which led him to forge a close alliance with Salvatore Toto Riina, the brutal upstart who would later dominate Cosa Nostra despite being underestimated by many of his contemporaries. Greco served as Riina's trusted informant within the commission, relaying details of conspiracies and criticisms aimed at Riina, particularly those plotted by figures like Gaetano Badalamenti. As a reward for his unwavering loyalty, Riina allowed Greco to hold the symbolic title of chairman of the commission, though in truth, he wielded little real power and acted as Riina's puppet. La Favarella became much more than just farmland. It was a nerve center for Cosa Nostra's operations. Beyond producing heroin, the estate housed clandestine activities that included the incineration of murdered mafiosi. Rumors even suggested that Greco, ever pragmatic, would feed the charred remains of Mafia victims to his pigs, for he maintained a large pigsty on the property. Given its proximity to Palermo, just a 10-minute drive away, La Favarella also became a favorite site for secret Mafia meetings. The gatherings took place within a two-story manor, hidden from prying eyes by thick groves of citrus trees. Each month, a convoy of armored BMWs, favored by Mafia members for their luxury and strength, would appear outside the estate, carrying bodyguards and capos alike. The meetings themselves were held not in the main house, but underground, in an expansive natural cavern once part of an old quarry. The entrance to this secret chamber was ingeniously concealed behind ceramic tiles in the main living room. After slipping through the hidden passage, attendees would navigate steep stone stairs and a narrow corridor lit only by flashlights or candles to reach a broad, naturally formed hall. From there, a network of radiating tunnels connected to smaller caves, offering potential hiding places for fugitive mafiosi. Evidence of these secret accommodations included mattresses stored on the upper floors and candles tucked into niches carved directly into the rock walls, ready to illuminate the darkness when needed. Though Greco spent considerable time at La Favarella, he maintained other residences where he lived more regularly, including a heavily guarded home on Via Sicily in Palermo, again shielded by acres of citrus groves. La Favarella remained reserved for high-level gatherings and extravagant banquets of the men of honor. The estate was equipped for hospitality on a grand scale, boasting nearly 60 chairs, vast kitchen ovens, and enormous grills stationed throughout the property. It was in these hidden, guarded spaces, far from the public eye, that the decisions shaping the destiny of Cosa Nostra were made. La Favarella, the sprawling estate belonging to Michele Greco, was far more than a hidden heroin refinery or a site where the bodies of Rina's enemies were quietly disposed of. Despite its grim underbelly, the property was simultaneously a glittering social hub where Sicily's elite, and even prominent guests from mainland Italy, were often entertained. Lavish parties were held there, with the estate's own wine flowing freely in overwhelming abundance. None of the distinguished guests, not even the Archbishop and Metropolitan Cardinal of Palermo, Ernesto Ruffini, had the faintest suspicion that the gracious host was not only involved in organized crime but occupied a high-ranking position within the Mafia. Hidden beyond the seemingly innocent mandarin groves was a sizable heroin refinery, and unbeknownst to all, La Favarella doubled as a Mafia crematorium where inconvenient bodies were reduced to ashes. Greco, outwardly, maintained an image of an affluent and law-abiding landowner, a man seemingly far removed from the murky world of crime. His public persona was so carefully constructed that, even though his cousin was widely recognized as a disgraceful black sheep with evident criminal ties, Greco himself was officially portrayed as detached from any contact with the disreputable relative. Yet this facade was nothing more than an illusion. Among the men of honor, it was an open secret that the so-called Pope was ruthless, willing to sentence anyone to death who dared, even accidentally, to utter his name or that of his estate in the wrong place, at the wrong time, or especially under police interrogation. The veil of invisibility surrounding Michele Greco began to unravel in 1982 when his name first appeared in an official police report compiled by Antonio Cassara, then the head of Palermo's police force. This extensive report was the result of an intensive investigation that revealed that the leadership of Cosa Nostra had shifted firmly into the hands of the Corleone clan, with Salvatore Rina exerting iron-fisted control. The document, known as Michele Greco Plus 161, listed the names of 162 of the most dangerous mafiosi involved in international drug trafficking, numerous murders, and other serious crimes. The heroin refined at La Favarella was one of the illicit commodities linked to this dark network. Cassara's report would later form part of the foundation for the massive indictment during the Maxi trial, and more importantly, it directed law enforcement's focus toward Michele Greco, setting the wheels of justice in motion. Although Greco initially managed to elude capture by hiding on a well-guarded farm in Cacamo, surrounded by his loyal soldiers, the police eventually discovered his hideout. On February 20, 1986, he was finally arrested and charged with a litany of crimes, including a staggering 78 murders. Nevertheless, Greco stubbornly maintained his innocence, denying any involvement in killings and refuting all claims of affiliation with organized crime. He defended himself with an air of injured innocence, asserting, "I am merely a peace-loving farmer who has been terribly mistaken for a mafioso, perhaps because real mafiosi from Sicily happen to share my surname." When asked about the Mafia Commission, he craftily replied, "Of course I know about the cupola. Like every good Italian, I go to church," deliberately conflating the term for the Mafia Leadership Council with church architecture. Throughout the long and grueling 9-month trial, Greco maintained an ostentatious display of piety, constantly clutching a Bible and dramatically leafing through its pages during proceedings. When the time came for the judges to deliberate their verdict, Greco had the audacity to lecture them, offering a thinly veiled sermon, "I wish peace upon the presiding judge and his family. Peace of spirit and conscience is fundamental in judging others. These are not my words but those of our Lord, delivered to Moses." Despite his pious theatrics, the judges, clear in their conscience and undeterred by his performance, sentenced Michele Greco to life imprisonment. For a moment, it seemed that Greco might escape the consequences of his crimes, as an appeals court overturned the conviction, acquitting him and 7 other mafiosi. However, Italy's Supreme Court swiftly reinstated the original sentence, and Greco was sent to prison, where he would spend the remainder of his life. Michele Greco died of cancer in a Roman prison on February 13, 2008, ending the life of a man who had so successfully masked his monstrous deeds behind a facade of respectability. His once feared estate, La Favarella, was confiscated by the state following his conviction. In a remarkable twist of fate, the Italian authorities, with significant assistance from European Union funds, decided to breathe new life into the abandoned vineyards. They replanted the land with fresh vines, transforming a symbol of criminal power into one of renewal and justice. The wines produced from these revitalized lands were proudly marketed as anti-mafia wines, with labels bearing the statement that the products came from vineyards seized from the mafia. One particular winery, Santa Passi, established on land once owned by mafia bosses, went a step further, adorning its bottles with the faces of Cosa Nostra's victims, including Giuseppe Impastato, the journalist and activist brutally murdered by the mafia in 1978. Thus, the soil once soaked in blood and secrets now bore fruit in defiance of the criminal empires that once ruled it.